Welcome to the Burned Out Preacher podcast, where we have frank discussions weekly on ministry struggles and how many of us in the ministry have gone from overwhelmed and exhausted to calm and equipped leaders who love being in ministry. I am your host, Monique Addison-Stinson, burnout prevention coach for ministry leaders. Are you ready to overcome burnout? If your answer is yes, then keep listening. Hello and welcome back to the Burned Out Preacher podcast. I am your host, Monique Addison-Stinson, burnout prevention coach for ministry leaders. And I help ministry leaders who are overwhelmed and exhausted go to calm and equipped ministry leaders and those who love ministry. And we are continuing our episode or our series called It's Time to Talk About Ministry Burnout. And I am so excited. I have an amazing guest. You're going to hear me say this every time because each guest that I have is absolutely amazing. But this one, I've been knowing her since we were kids. So I'm not going to say how many years that's been, but it's been a few years. And I am going to let her introduce herself.
Thank you so very much. Yes, we have known each other some time. I am the Reverend Teris Broughton-Robinson, an Itinerant Elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church and a community leader here. And I tell you what, I am so excited to be able to have this dialogue with you as a ministry consultant and the seriousness of how you've taken your calling for the past few years. I am just totally excited.
Thank you, sis. I appreciate that. So I know this is your first time. I'm sure you've heard the podcast. So from the title of the podcast, Over on These Streets, we talk about burnout and particularly ministry burnout. So when you hear ministry burnout, what do you think about that, or what's your definition of ministry burnout?
Okay, well, that's a good one. Let's see. Can we define ministry burnout?
Yeah.
It is the process of, working hard at ministry without a restorative routine to sustain it.
I like that. I love the word restorative. I love that. Listen at you. Okay, then. So, do you feel like you've experienced burnout at all?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I mean, especially being a new pastor and having to, I guess, reframe the idea of what success looks like.
Right.
Of course, in the 21st century, this post-pandemic environment, everyone wants to still make an impact.
Exactly.
But what does that look like to do it healthily?
Right.
And I had to totally readjust, reframe, and reorganize. Number one, my expectations of myself. And number two, my expectations of others.
I love that. What exactly would you say was going on with you when you felt like you were dealing with burnout? Like, did you use the word I'm burned out, or how are you feeling? Because I feel like a lot of pastors and ministry leaders are in the throes of burnout, but they don't know it.
Ooh, that's good, sis. Absolutely. You're exactly right. Now, really what we need you to do is do us a how you know you're in burnout questionnaire. That's what's coming.
Actually, I have one.
That's okay, but also I think that when we need to recognize that our relationship with God, our prayer life, even our walk, our faith walk, it is not contingent on our ability to properly handle stress. So just because you're called and you're chosen and you're, what does that old pastor say? Saved, sanctified, fire baptized, dipped in the blood, washed in the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
You could still be all that and still experience burnout. Because, and the reason why we don't verbalize it is because pastors and preachers have had to operate in the misnomer that in order to be called and anointed, that you have to have a perfect life.
Right.
That's not the truth. And so people are less transparent because of the vulnerability of criticism.
Right. I love
which is separate for us than any other profession.
So true, so true. And I've often mentioned that burnout, well, actually pastors, that profession is very similar to that of a caregiver. But I like what you just said, that is being a pastor in the ministry leader. We just don't verbalize it because it's not, I don't want to say it's looked down upon, but it kind of is. You are, I don't know, you kind of looked at as not working hard enough. You're not growing your ministry like you should, unless you like all your hair is coming out and you just like on the brink of you're just on the brink of destruction in order for you to be looked at and respected, unfortunately, in the ministry. And I found that a lot of us are dying. There's so many health conditions that come out of stress and particularly burnout that a lot of pastors are dealing with. Actually, there's a study, and I can't remember, I'll have to pull it up and I'll probably add it to the show notes, but there's a study that said that the pastoral profession, the health challenges that pastors have is like that of white men or white CEOs. They have the same health conditions that a lot of CEOs, particularly white CEOs, and this particular study mentioned white CEOs because unfortunately we have more of those than we do Black. That's another podcast episode. But anywho, but they've mentioned that pastors' health is dire, and it's bad. It's really bad, and it actually stems from not handling stress properly. So when you experience burnout, do you feel like you've recovered? And if so, what did you do to recover?
It's just like what you brought up a good point, and I don't want to miss it. I don't want us to just run through it. That was very valid what you said when you talked about the white CEOs, right? Because we have an understanding of the culture, the corporate culture, as being one that is highly individualistic, extremely, pressure driven and acceptance aimed.
Right.
So the pressure of being accepted by all of these people that are quote unquote under you. And then you have this massive responsibility to run an organization that is seen as that is noted to be hierarchical. Yeah. So, right. Those are very similar. And just like, and to your point, I would like to say I did exactly what the writer of that research paper was probably suggesting, and which is to change your culture, right? There has to be a different cultural center for what success looks like and how your calling is exposed during even those rough times. Yeah. So for instance, like, I have my Sex in the Church podcast where we discuss the issues of sex, sexuality, and sexism. Now, when April hit, that was Sexual Assault Awareness Month. It was, we're telling stories, we're getting people to tell stories and giving their stories. And honestly, I've collected 1,092 stories in the past 10 years that I've done this work.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's easy for me to, put something out there, right? But also realize maybe maybe a week into it, that it started to trigger me, that I had to sit with some of this for a second. And I had, you know what I mean? So what does the ministry do at this point when I'm triggered and this is not putting me in a good space?
Right.
So then let's flip the script a little bit. Now we're going to talk about some statistics. All right. Now we're going to talk about some coping mechanisms. Look, now we're going to hear me talk about my story with this licensed professional. You understand?
Right.
How do we live out loud and authentically and still stay committed to our God and our calling and our ministries?
And that's a good point, because I feel like I know God allows us to, he requires us to live authentically, but unfortunately the church does not. And that's the problem, right? That's the problem. Right. And that's the problem. That's why we have burnout.
Ooh, honey, but let me tell you, and this is, I have, because that has really been my rub. And I'm gonna, you know what, you're just hitting it right now. I'm gonna tell you, you're exactly right. Living inauthentically will have you in burnout. Mm-hmm. I remember trying to, especially after I first accepted my calling, it was like, oh, I have to look like this and be like this and act like this and, maintain this, you know what I'm saying? And it almost killed me.
Yeah.
Right. Then being assigned to a church with very traditional down home values that was brazenly antithesis to what my ministry is all about.
Wow.
And so to be able to, first of all, love them and honor them and spiritually lead them as far as I could, but still be true to what I know God has called me to do. And the congregation, whether they're tithers or not, whether they're coming to the four walls or not, we all have a congregation and we all have a pastor.
Yeah.
And so each one of us, right? So I have to be authentic to those people who are my congregation. And that group, we cherish authenticity.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what type of pastor you are now. And now today, look at Jamal Bryant. They told him years ago, you're too out there, you're too radical. And what did he do? He started a church of those out there radical people. AME.
In the AME church, right?
Absolutely.
Right,
absolutely.
Right, exactly.
So being a son of a bishop, grandson of a bishop, okay, his granddaddy was a graduate of Payne Theological Seminary. He said, okay, I see how y'all said it's supposed to be done, but let me show you how God called me to do it. Right. And he started his church, and the church then became packed with people who think and praise and understand God just as the way he does. And so that's what we're doing right now. I mean, it's not about trying to fit into a box or fit into some shoes that were not made for you. And I will never do that again. Not in the name of Jesus.
Exactly.
I won't.
Exactly. And that is one of the ways to prevent burnout. It's not to fit in boxes and to do what it is God wants you to do. Gosh, you mentioned a couple things. So I do want to I want to go back and talk about sex in the church. But before we do that, talk about when you were first assigned and just that whole, just from coming out of seminary, going through the Ministerial Institute, all of that, and then being assigned, and how does that affect you physically and mentally?
Oh, well, phew.
And share what you want to share now. If you don't want to,
yes, right.
Share what
let me give some context. I did receive my first appointment after graduating from seminary, but my first assignment was as an intern.
Gotcha.
So I have to, give honor to both. first was I went in trying to fit the mold, and quickly found out that I did not have the tools necessary to. I didn't. This particular story, I have to say, I remember sitting in the congregation in this beautiful, historic AME church, and the pastor says, "All right, yeah, nobody is going to leave this sanctuary until this budget is paid and the bills are paid." Now, the brother said, "I've gotten my payment for the month. Y'all, I've got mine already, but y'all need to come up with," okay, and lock the door, and had to pro temp lock the door. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to be able to, I don't have what this takes. You know what I'm saying? Fast forward, having becoming seminary trained and recognizing that everyone, even if they lay the hands on you, everyone who is called to be a leader in the Zion is not called to be a leader to show you what to do. Some people God allows to show you how it should not be done.
Right.
And so I had to, take that into account. Now, here it is in the next situation. My main thing is, and just like I said, even though the people were in a mental space that was very traditional, because I came in and I loved them, right? They was rocking with me for at least a year and a half, right, before some other crazy stuff happened. So it was the fact that I have been able to watch how I want to be treated, right, and what I see being done. Those were the jewels I brought with me into my first appointment where I was pastor, and the people loved me. And the sad thing about it is, when I had to leave, primarily because of a naked picture, but because of a naked picture, I had to leave. But the people cried. You know what I'm saying? So even though I'm talking about this Black Jesus, and I'm talking about chakras, and I'm talking about meditation, they were with me. They were with me. And so because I loved them, they loved me.
Gotcha. I love that. I really, really do. So you mentioned the alleged great segue to talk about sex in the church. And I'm sure people are probably like, what in the what? Sex in the what?
Yes, right.
So tell people more about sex in the church.
Well, I'll say this. As a womanist theologian, right now I am working on a doctorate at the oldest freestanding HBCU seminary in the country, Payne Theological Seminary. And my project is womanist approaches to Christian conversion with use of with use of film and media. We have to make certain that the 90% of people that are attending and upholding our church, that are cleaning and frying chicken, that are giving out programs and getting the kids to choir rehearsal, that group, we should attend to their needs. And I'm talking about women's issues, right? So we also have the situation with men who have had, more men were molested as boys than we're willing to talk about, and that they are willing to discuss because of the this toxic masculine notion that you should like sex with whomever, whenever, however, and get it from whomever, however, whenever, as early as possible. And that there are people who actually set their children up. I mean, we can talk about the big names, but there are people who actually set their children up to make sure that they have sexual experiences. I mean, can you imagine being a boy growing up in that type of environment? Let's make it clear, this type of environment, the type of environment where, if you have a question about sex, who can you go to that is not either bound by it or addicted to it?
Right.
If you are a girl who, just got her period, church is the spiritual house. But if you just got your period, you can't go to nobody at church and ask spiritually, what does that mean?
Exactly, which is so sad.
So we need to make certain to serve the souls that have come to be served.
In all
and Sex in the Church is a podcast that provides faith-based information, spiritually informed information. Because here's the thing, I have a Master of Divinity, not a Master's in Christian Education. So this is about the full scope and holistic aspect of one's soul and spirituality, not just what your Sunday school teacher told you in 3rd grade.
Ooh. I love it. And I love that you, and we both are trying to do the same thing in terms of holisticness, if you will, in the church. And I'm coming from it from a health standpoint, and what you're talking about affects your health as well.
Yes.
If you're not allowed to ask those questions in church and talk about those things that probably happened to you from a brother in church, and you're supposed to kind of brush it off and not mention it, that causes burnout as well. And just think about all the pastors and ministry leaders that are carrying that past with them and trying to minister to people, and they've never talked about it or addressed all of that happened to them.
Yeah, and that's why we have churches that are ill-equipped to handle it, because you still have people who are dealing with their own trauma. Right. Now, and let's be clear, just because, and I want to say, and I know you're not saying this, but I want to restate, just because you have gone through trauma does not mean that your usefulness is any way slighted.
Exactly.
And I think that that's something we should embrace. No matter where you are in the process of healing, as long as you are in the process of healing, then you are a positive effect on someone else. Absolutely. So whether it is the encounter stage where, you know what, I just addressed it. I just decided to even address what happened to me when I was 11. Or, whether you are in the maintenance stage. Hey, and let's look, it's more than just, sexual trauma. You have to think about it. People who have gender issues, people who, I don't know, it could be you. It could be, I'm a person that I have not traditionally felt attracted to the sex that people have thought I would be. You know what I'm saying? And growing up in church, the isolation of having to do that alone or without someone that is biblically informed to help you through it. Look at abortion. How many girls, how many boys have had this happen, who did this, right, in their teenage years or young adult years, and had nobody to talk to or process it with. Let's look at divorce. People have been divorced in church 10, 15 years and still have not talked to anybody. We at church tell them, come on, you get married in church, but then if you get divorced, you're on your own. Right. That's unfair, okay? And how do we deal with the history of toxic masculinity and toxic femininity that has become interset in our communities and the way that we relate to one another as Black men and Black women? Like if we're not having these conversations, we're setting people up for failure.
Exactly. So true. I love that. And I love that you're doing that work, because it is so needed. It is so needed. And God bless you for doing that. I know you mentioned, I think, did you say that you recovered from burnout? Do you feel like you're still working through that?
Oh yeah. You know what? The recovery, and I would like to say this, in comparing it to maybe somebody who's running a little race, like a marathon. Sometimes when you're sprinting and you're not meant to be a sprinter, you burn out faster, Right. But if you're meant to be a hurler, you're meant to be at the long jump, when you're doing what you're called to do at the rhythm and flow and pace that you're called to do it, all you have to do is make sure to put the process of countering burnout in your routine.
Right.
You know, if you have a way to not be burned out, if you have a way to replenish your soul, replenish your mind, replenish that is a part of the routine,
right,
then you're less likely to be burnt out. You're more likely then to be able to enjoy vacation instead of recovering from burnout.
Come on now. Come on now. Because that's what I teach. That is exactly what I teach, is putting routines in place that will help you prevent and overcome burnout. Because stress is going, if you are living, you are going to encounter stress, period. And burnout comes about when you haven't handled the stress. Like, you're not well equipped to handle stress. You don't have the systems in place to help you with that stressful event. It then turns into burnout. So I'm so happy you mentioned that. You mentioned changing your culture early, which I absolutely love. You know, my background is HR, and I can talk for days about culture and how that is the soil, if you will. It is the soil in which burnout grows from.
Wow.
It really, really is. And so I'm so happy that you said you changed your culture. And it happens sometimes. You got to change the people you're around, the environment. You have to, if you care about overcoming burnout, if you care about thriving in ministry, you do have to do that sometimes. I'm so happy that you mentioned that. And it sounds like you have created systems that have helped you overcome burnout, and it's helping you prevent it in the future.
But now the system I need to create is your consultation, how to move. You know, I'm moving at a nice pace, okay? But now we need to put things in place to progress.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know how to reach me. You know how to reach me. But I love that so much. I also want to mention, because I've spoken to a few new pastors, and I remember when I was in ministry, I was not mentally prepared for any of that. I was like, what did I just sign up for? Is
this what was behind the veil the whole
time? What? And I really do believe that burnout prevention or stress prevention really should be something that's taught in all types of, in our ministerial institute, in all seminary. I mean, it's kind of like so I recently completed my health coaching certification. So I'm a certified integrated health coach. And you
got some more credentials.
Okay. So I have all of this knowledge in health coaching, but I didn't know squat about running a business.
Right.
And I feel like that's what happens to pastors. They learn a lot of biblical ministry, everything, but there's no adequate teaching on how to pastor or run, if you will, a church. And I know this is very controversial, but it really is similar to being a CEO, being an entrepreneur. It really, really is. There's similar qualities, similar characteristics, similar job descriptions, if you will.
Right.
But I think that's one of the reasons that new pastors they were like me. I wasn't a pastor. I got off that track pretty early. I was like, this ain't for me. But I feel like if it's taught in seminary, then maybe we can retain a lot of new pastors. What's your thoughts on any type of stress prevention or I don't know, any of that being taught in seminary.
Why did you do this to me? This was a setup. This is a setup. I'm just gonna say, like, I know that a lot of people feel that they can get a degree. I know people who are successful preachers that have bachelors in English. I know people who are successful preachers that have masters in Christian knowledge,
Right.
There are a lot of, speaking on seminary, there are a lot of different types of institutions. We have, somehow our church has been inundated with a lot of these white evangelical for-profit online schools
Yeah.
that do not address the holistic, as you always say, the holistic aspect of pastoring. So unfortunately, we have a lot of people who have these masters, but it doesn't help you as a pastor in today's environment of a person's soul, from their, psychologically, emotionally, socially, culturally, financially, all of the aspects of a person. You're not going to learn how to cater to the human soul with those types of programs.
Yeah.
And I can just, it was the Reverend Dr. Michael Johnson, may he rest in power,
Yeah.
that pulled me aside and said, you are a minister and you need the best education. And, these schools, the ones that deal with the human soul and that have had 100-year track record of producing top voices in the academy and in Christendom, this is where you need to go. Don't be in a rush just to have a degree.
Right.
Just to be able to say, I got me you got people who got PhDs in six months just to be able to say, I'm doctor.
Right.
But what did you learn? How did you learn to care for the soul of the people? Exactly. And in that process, because the 3-year process of seminary is called, the first year is called deconstruction, where you are being stripped. Everything you came there with you got to let that go. Wow. And so during that deconstruction that we who go to those seminaries we're having to come out into the profession and deal with people who did not have that training. Right. So it's a different code. We got a whole different language, so yes, it becomes problematic when, and that's what I'm saying. It's not necessarily the school you go to, it is your reluctance to learn the information that you need to learn to help your people progress. And so in the schools that I attended, in the ones that I was I am fortunate to be associated with, that is a mainline consideration. Pastoral care and counseling, we all have to take it. They advise all of us to make sure that we are in counseling, we are in therapy. You should never be providing any type of pastoral care or counseling and you are not in therapy. I mean, these are basic, rules of thumb for those of us who were educated similarly.
Love that. I love that. I'm so happy that they're focusing on pastoral care. It is vitally important, but from my observation, I feel like it can be better. I feel like there's some, just from what I've seen, there needs to be some other things they could focus on as well.
Like, I tell you what, once we get home, I think that's, when you're in the safety of your seminary campus, and you know what I'm saying, everybody around you is a scholar, and like my therapist, her name was Miss Robinson. So Miss Robinson, she, Teris, where are you? I mean, it was this is the culture of what we do. This is how we do it. But then when you get home, whether it is the ecclesiastic, it's just those resources are not set up the same. Your support system is not the same. Your colleague network shifts. So instead of, hey, how are you maintaining your health? How are you maintaining your wholeness? How are you affecting yours? How is your energy affecting even the people around you? See, this is the type of community that raised me. So when we get here and then the conversation is, woo, you got a big church.
Right.
So it has to be established. And I like how you said that, it's lackluster. There's a lot more that needs to happen, and that needs to take place on the appointment level. It needs to take place
exactly
on when we make it home. I don't know what it's called,
right. Exactly. I agree. And that's I saw that when I was going through the Ministerial Institute, didn't start seminary. But I saw that was missing. And just from the conversations I've had with a lot of pastors, because I have a lot of pastor friends, a lot of ministerial friends, I saw that was lacking. And that's when God told me to start my ministry of ministering pastors, which I ran from. I did not want to do this, but I am so happy that I've been obedient, and it's been amazing. So that is the community that I am trying to create here, is a safe space for pastors to have those colleagues within this community that you can talk to if you're having a problem with, Sister Lulabelle, who is your administrative assistant, but she don't know how to use a computer. Those things can be stressful after.
Only in the Black church do we have those types of problems.
Why is Sister Lulabelle with her flip phone your administrative assistant? Like, we need to change that. Let's move Sister, and my apologies to any Sister Lulabelles out there. That's just the first name.
with a flip phone.
With a flip phone, that's just the first thing that popped in my head. But why isn't Sister Lulabelle running another ministry? Clearly administrative assistance is not her ministry. She's not. And
honey, that's too limited. See, and this is what I'm talking about. When we when we're dealing with the spiritual leadership and the assisting to cultivate the human soul. My responsibility as a leader is to make sure that Sister Lulabelle knows her position in this church is invaluable, exactly. And that she, her work is necessary, and it is much needed. And so therefore we're gonna promote you. We're gonna promote you to coordinator of this, and I'm gonna give you an assistant, okay? And she's gonna be the director of this thing here, okay? Right. You're the coordinator, they're the director. This is how this is gonna go, because you're so needed and so valuable. Exactly. See, that's when you naturally want to make certain that the human soul is intact and inspired.
Exactly.
It's not about you as the leader. It's about making sure the people feel the presence of God when they are with you.
Absolutely. And having those conversations and getting to know Sister Lulabelle. Look, Sister Lulabelle, I'm sorry, we can use your name. But getting to know Sister Lulabelle and what her God-given talents and gifts are, and let her operate in that. And then she will be so happy and fulfilled and willing to stay. Absolutely. And then you can find someone that has those administrative tasks and gifts that can be your administrative assistant, and everybody's happy.
Right. That's it. That's all I'm saying. honor people. And I hear you, on your trainings and things you discuss with your organizational management aspect, how to manage volunteers.
Yep.
That's basically what we're talking about.
Exactly. Everybody, and a lot of pastors don't like to hear this, but the congregation does not have to do what you ask them to do.
Right. And I'm gonna go right. And I'm gonna go so far as to say, when you, because of your poor management ability, make obedience to God contingent to fulfilling your administrative responsibilities, that's when it's called spiritual abuse. Right. Spiritual abuse. But you don't know that because you don't have a colleague, you don't have a group of people who you're accountable to, because you went to school, you and your phone, and no other group of people that you had to process best practices with.
Exactly.
So that's why our denominations are so important. Absolutely. We have to have that type of accountability. How I see you got, you made your budget, but how are you affecting the people?
Exactly. I love that. And I feel like we need to talk more about that, because, and again, it's not to dog pastors at all. It's just that, as I mentioned earlier, kind of like being a CEO or a business owner, there's some things you just aren't taught.
Right.
And that's one of the things is.
Ooh. I'm gonna have to give some people some props right quick, because even in a city that is not an Atlanta or a DC or a Miami, there are people who have been able to care for human souls in such a way that their ministries flourish. Right. 20 years ago, we did not even perceive that the interdenominational or the non-denominational churches would be the mainline churches in a city. Those were the ones that just came up and cropped up alongside. But now, 10, 20 years after leaving outside of this traditional box and catering to the souls of the people, these non-denominational churches was, you're good with gardening? You're over the gardening ministry.
Exactly.
Oh, you're good with, are you a nurse? Okay. Hey, work along with this health ministry. They're going to put you to, you have, what you said, you have dreams about this and that. Okay, we're going to have a spiritual gifts class.
Exactly.
Reaching outside of the box to recognize who is at the center of this. Who is at the center of this is the souls of the people. That's the center. So when we serve the souls of the people, then we're less likely to go wrong.
Yes.
When you're serving yourself, you're going to fall off quick.
Oh, yes, ma'am. That is so true. So true. I'm going to end it here, because we're right at an hour. You and I could talk.
You already know.
I could talk forever, but thank you so much. I want you to tell everyone where they can find you on social media.
Oh, wow. You can find me on Instagram at Pastor Teris. You can find me on Twitter at Pastor Teris. And I think I'm on Facebook as well as Pastor Teris.
I think so.
Yes.
I'll make sure I put a link in the description box where everybody can find you. And also, if you can give me a link to your podcast as well, I'll make sure to link that in the description box. But I enjoy this so much, y'all. I have to cut it off because she and I will really. I'm
two peas in a pod. We could go. We the same color green.
Exactly. I may have to bring you back on so we can continue the conversation. But that is all, Pastor Teris. Thank you.
Well, look, it would be my pleasure. And no, sister, thank you. Thank you for your knowledge, your wisdom. Thank you for taking your calling seriously enough to become prepared for it. Thank you for continuing your education in spite of your extreme intelligence. And thank you for being wholehearted and sensitive to the needs of individual people, even when individuals aren't wholeheartedly sensitive to you. Thank you so much for the example.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, that is all, everyone. I will talk to you later. Bye.